Hi, I'm Todd Elliott. I want to welcome you to the Law Library in Portsmouth Public Library in Portsmouth, Virginia. The course title for this lecture is Africans in British North America, which is an upper level undergraduate course. My lecture is titled Understanding Race and American Slavery. A recent cause for controversy appears to lie in how African American history is taught in our schools today. Among the buzzwords that are fraught with controversy is the term critical race theory. The author Angela Harris recently defined CRT as a progressive legal movement that seeks to transform the relationship among racism, and power. This week on social media, the topic took on a life of its own, becoming a catchphrase for all sorts of issues when writer Michael Harriot asked the question, how did critical race theory ruin your life? As you can imagine, it caused quite a stir in Twitterverse. Critical race theory killed my cat and caused a global pandemic, which left me stuck in the house for a year. Critical race theory made Star Wars episodes 1 through 3 and ruined my childhood. Perhaps worst of all, as a Southerner, critical race theory put raisins in my potato salad. You get the idea. Stephen Sawchuk, associate editor of Education Week, reminds us that critical race theory is an academic concept which is more than 40 years old. The core idea is that racism is a social construct and that it's not merely the product of individual bias or prejudice, but also something embedded in legal systems and policies. And it begs the question, 40 years after its conception, why is it a problem now? Opinions abound, left, right, and center. One thing is obvious. When it comes to American history, race matters. One of the reasons for the recent media chatter, I believe, stems from a Pulitzer-winning essay written by Nicole Hannah-Jones of the New York Times Magazine, introducing a public history initiative titled the 1619 Project. The project attempts to reframe the country's history by placing the consequences of slavery and the contributions of Black Americans at the center of our national story. Slavery has been troublesome for American history from the beginning, from Thomas Jefferson, who expressed his concern frankly in a letter to John Holmes, stating that comparing slavery to a wolf and having the wolf by the ear, and we can neither hold him nor safely let him go. Justice is in one scale and self-preservation in the other. What can history teach us about the matter of slavery from its arrival in British North America and its 13 original colonies? Let's take a look at just one of those colonies. The differences between indentured servitude and slavery in Virginia can be traced to the early days of the colony by investigating their laws. English common law provided for a certain type of servitude that existed mostly in the form of an apprenticeship, and its roots go back to the Middle Ages. During the Stuart monarchy, by law, servants could be bound to their masters by an instrument or indenture, which was a form of written covenant or consent. After the period of indentured service ended, a formal release was provided, which legally gave the individual his or her freedom. In other words, servanthood was based on a binding contract which was active for a limited time only. An indentured servant could be punished by his master. However, the servant could seek redress in court for neglect or abuse. Thus, we have the colonizers of Jamestown creating covenants with the Virginia Company in London, exchanging their labor for profit shares in this experiment on mainland North America. History recalls the arrival of Africans to the Virginia colony, with accounts from John Smith, John Rolfe, and John Pory all coming together regarding the arrival of a Dutch ship in August 1619, which sold 20 and odd Negroes to the governor at a good rate. What is not clear from the encounter is whether other Africans were already living in the Old Dominion when that anonymous Dutch captain relinquished this black cargo. Whatever the case may be, it did not signal a mass migration of blacks to the colony. In fact, Virginia's African population as late as 1700 numbered, according to one estimate, only numbered somewhere around 6,000, and most of them arrived after 1660. Since the black population was so small, therefore, there was limited value added to the overall economy of the colony at the time, and early race relations were actually fairly flexible. One historian noted that there was a particularly close association between white servants and black slaves. What also appears true is the fact that being black in a colony did not assure enslaved status initially. In North America, most of the slave societies depended on the importation of men, women, and children from Africa to maintain a robust and cruel labor force. So cruel, in fact, that Virginia was the first English colony to have a black population growing through self-reproduction. Before this, slaves were simply worked to death and replaced with more slaves, a method that was considered more economical. Thornton pointed to economic factors that made slavery preferable to indentured servitude, and this was further supported by the loss of Dutch holdings in Brazil in the mid-17th century that forced them to literally engage in a fire sale of their human African property. Everything must go. In an article on interracial sex and the law, Higginbotham stated that racial purity lies at the heart of black enslavement, and there is probably no better place than Virginia to examine the origins of the American doctrine of racial purity and related prohibitions. Higginbotham asserts that while Virginia has been celebrated as the mother of presidents and the mother of revolutionaries, it can also be called the mother of American slavery. There is evidence to support this. Here was the colony that first formulated legal definitions for race and codified restrictions against interracial sex and marriage. In 1662, the House of Burgesses defined the status of slave inheritance regarding children born of interracial parentage, namely from a slave Negro mother and a free English father. The act read in part, "Whereas some doubts have arisen whether children got by any Englishman upon a Negro woman should be slave or free, be it therefore enacted and declared by this present grand assembly that all children born in this country shall be held bond or free only according to the condition of the mother." Consider this from the standpoint of English law, where this represents a marked departure from the tradition of passing status along paternal lines. A defining line for slavery was being drawn here, and it was supported by law. And Virginians were just getting started. I conclude pretty much where I started. It does appear that race matters in how we understand this part of American history. What do you think? We'll kick things off with looking at what a slave voyage entailed, and your assignment is to explore the transatlantic and intra-American slave trade databases. These are the culmination of several decades of independent and collaborative research by scholars drawing upon data in libraries and archives around the Atlantic world. Slave Voyages 2.0, available at slavevoyages.org, is the product of a multidisciplinary team of historians, librarians, curriculum specialists, cartographers, computer programmers, and web designers in consultation with scholars of the slave trade from universities in Europe, Africa, South America, and North America. It took years to put this resource together. Through it, you'll discover how European colonizers trafficked and enslaved laborers as a source of empire building, starting with the first slave voyage direct from Africa to the Americas in 1525. One of the most dramatic aspects of the slave voyages site is the time lapse of slave ships traversing the Atlantic. It's very powerful. And I can say this, as the descendant of enslaved persons in America. In fact, my maternal grandmother's grandmother had been born in slavery in nearby Suffolk. The story matters. It matters a lot to a lot of people and should be told. For all the dads out there this weekend, happy Father's Day and thank you.